Chapter 201. We were slowly approaching the island where the Northern Sea Ice Palace was. The Frostvale Sea, vast and bitterly cold, stretched endlessly around us. It never fully froze over. Summer kept it from turning into a solid wasteland of ice, but the water was still sharp enough to bite at the skin. It was the sea that separated the eastern continent from the northern continent, mirroring the Luthuddle Sea that separated the eastern continent from the southern continent. And then there was the island. It loomed before us, snow-covered and silent, a frozen graveyard where no living thing, including mana beasts, stirred. The first thing that stood out was the spire, or what was left of it. Once a towering symbol of power, now partially collapsed, its jagged remains jutting out of the ruins like broken bones. This had been the heart of the Northern Sea Ice Palace. Even in its ruined state, it still held an undeniable presence, a monument to what had once been, and what had been lost. Our ship slid to a stop at the island's edge, the automated systems humming softly as it powered down. "Walk," Serafina asked, her voice quieter than usual. I nodded. As we stepped onto the snow-covered shore, I felt the tension in her body, a weight pressing down on her as she took in the place she had spent her entire life avoiding. "Mother," she whispered. Her breath curled into the freezing air, her face slightly flushed from more than just the cold. "Sarah," I said softly. Our hands brushed against each other. I didn't think. I just reached out, intertwining my fingers with hers, grounding her. She looked at me, lips pressing together, and nodded. "I'm here," I said, and together we walked forward. The land of the Northern Sea Ice Palace stretched before us. Technically, the sect had controlled the entire island, but the outer banks had been stripped bare. No buildings remained here, only remnants, shattered stone half buried in the snow, foundations of structures long since torn apart by time and war. We reached the ruined city, and Serafina exhaled a whisper. A ghost town. She wasn't wrong. It was like walking through a post-apocalyptic ruin, except this wasn't fiction. The snow covered everything, softening the destruction, but the damage was everywhere. Collapsed rooftops, shattered walls, streets littered with the remnants of a once thriving civilization. More than a decade had passed since the Shadow Seekers had done this, and yet it still felt fresh. For Serafina, this was a childhood ripped away. For me, it was something else entirely. I could feel it. The moment we stepped deeper into the ruins, something stirred at the edges of my senses. Since creating Erebus, I had grown closer to death itself. It was no longer just an abstract concept. It was something I could feel in the air, in the ground, in the very fabric of this place. And even without using lucent harmony, I could tell. This island was steeped in death. A massacre had happened here. Instinctively, I activated lucent harmony. My black star stirred, like an ember catching wind. My breath hitched. For a moment, the world around me shifted. The ruins felt thicker, the air heavier, as if something unseen still clung to this place. The echoes of what had happened here refused to fade, lingering like ghosts in the cold. "Arthur." Serafina's voice pulled me back. She squeezed my hand slightly, grounding me this time. "Nothing," I said, though I knew it wasn't. Because this place, these ruins, this was more than just a tragedy. This was a warning. The Northern Sea Ice Palace had been one of the strongest forces outside of the 7 superpowers. It had been thriving, and yet it had been wiped out. Because of the miasmic species. Because no matter how powerful humans became, no matter how much we fought back, this was the future that awaited us if we didn't stop them. "Arthur, do not be lost in the sea of death," Luna's voice murmured in my mind. I exhaled, forcing my breath to steady. Lucent harmony flickered out. It wasn't needed. I wasn't here to observe the dead. "I remember this place well," Serafina said, her voice quiet. "I used to play here when I was younger." I nodded, letting her speak. Serafina's mother had been the palace lord of the Northern Sea Ice Palace. Unlike now, when she spent most of her time in Mount Hua, she had once belonged to both worlds. She would split her time between the two, standing between her father's swords and her mother's ice, trying to be both. Rachel Creighton was Order incarnate, the Saintess. Cecilia Slatemark was Chaos incarnate, the Archwitch. And Serafina Zenith was meant to be both blossoming and frost. A bridge between Mount Hua and the Northern Sea Ice Palace. She had succeeded to a degree. Her ice crystal jade body was a marvel, one of the strongest elemental gifts of her generation. But it had limitations. She hadn't nurtured her ice enough. There had been no one left to guide her. And that was why we were here. We walked in silence, wandering through the ruins as the sun dipped lower, the sky bleeding into shades of deep blue and violet. The cold bit at the air, crisp and sharp, the snow crunching softly beneath our boots. Finally, as the first stars began to flicker above, Serafina slowed her steps. "I think that's enough for today," she muttered. She reached for her spatial ring, pulling out the high-tech tents we'd be using for the night. They unfolded sleekly in her hands, lined with heat regulation systems and reinforced alloy poles. Nothing like the traditional canvas structures of the past. But before she could set them up, I stopped her. "Sarah," I said, "come with me for a bit." She tilted her head but didn't resist as I took the tents and stored them in my own spatial ring. "Where are we going?" she asked as I led her through the snow-covered forest. I didn't answer. She didn't press. The trees stretched tall around us, their ancient trunks wrapped in layers of frost, their branches bowing under the weight of ice that had settled there for years, maybe decades. The air was still, thick with the kind of quiet that only places touched by time and loss could hold. Every step we took crunched against the snow, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the abandoned land around us. And then, we stepped into the clearing. Serafina let go of my hand. For a moment nothing happened. The world remained silent, frozen in time, the snow undisturbed except for our footprints. The clearing stretched wide before us, an expanse of untouched white beneath a sky shifting between twilight and night. Then, the iceflies rose. It started as a ripple in the air, almost imperceptible. A shiver that ran through the frost-laden ground, a pulse just beneath the surface. And then, all at once, the stillness shattered. 1,000 lights, maybe more, burst into the sky, the ground itself seeming to exhale as the first wave of glowing cyan creatures lifted from the snow, their soft, flickering light illuminating the clearing like 1,000 tiny stars breaking free from the earth. More followed, an endless tide of drifting luminescence, rising higher, moving in waves, their delicate forms pulsing with life. The air filled with their silent dance, a slow, weightless ballet, each icefly leaving behind faint trails of light that shimmered in the cold. They weren't fireflies, weren't bioluminescent drones engineered in some sterile lab. They were something else entirely. Something natural, something untouched by the war, by destruction, by time itself. A phenomenon unique to this island. Even after the tragedy, even after the palace fell, they survived. Serafina inhaled sharply. Not a gasp, not quite, but close. Her eyes, reflecting the cyan glow around us, widened slightly, the colors swirling in their depths. Serafina's voice caught. "I remember." She stared at the iceflies, her golden eyes wide, the glow reflecting in them like tiny stars. "Mother brought me here," she whispered. "She wanted to show me the charm of the Northern Sea Ice Palace." She had forgotten, but now it was coming back. I forgot about this," she said, voice trembling. I watched her carefully. "Don't close your eyes," I said gently. "Just watch. Remember." And for the first time since we set foot on this island, she did. Chapter 202. "Mommy, I'm bored." A small half-elf girl whined, clinging stubbornly to her mother's leg, her tiny hands gripping onto the flowing fabric of an intricate robe. Her mother, tall, regal, effortlessly composed, looked down with a gaze that was neither warm nor cold, caught somewhere between mild exasperation and patient endurance. "What is it, Serafina?" she asked. "I want to see something fun." Serafina huffed, crossing her arms in the way only an impatient child could. "The sun is setting," her mother pointed out. "It will be time for you to sleep soon." "I don't want to sleep yet." There was a long pause. Then, finally, her mother sighed. The kind of sigh that came from someone who had spent years balancing the roles of palace lord and parent without completely losing her mind. "Then," she said, scooping Serafina up into her arms, "I will show you something fun." Serafina wiggled in protest. She was too old to be carried. But as they moved, her complaints faded. People bowed as her mother passed, warriors and mages alike dipping their heads in reverence to the lady of the Northern Sea Ice Palace. And then, she gasped. Her mouth fell open. Her protests vanished. The sky had darkened, but the world had lit up. Glowing creatures floated gently through the air, their cyan light flickering like tiny captured stars. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Iceflies. Serafina's eyes, wide and shining, were the exact same shade of blue as the lights surrounding her. Wow! Her mother watched, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. Beautiful, isn't it? She asked. Serafina nodded furiously, her excitement bubbling over. This is but one of the wonders of the Northern Sea Ice Palace, her mother said, looking down at her daughter. In that moment, the coldness in her gaze melted, just slightly. A rare moment of warmth she couldn't always afford as Palace Lord. Serafina beamed up at her. I'll always remember this sight, Mommy. But memory is a cruel thing. Can fade. Can be buried. Can be stolen. Daddy. Serafina stood in the Mount Hua sect, small and confused. Where's Mommy? Li Zenith was kneeling in front of her, his posture stiff, his head bowed, the weight of something heavy pressing against his spine. Serafina stared at him, waiting for an answer. You said Mommy would come with you, Daddy. Her father didn't speak. His lips pressed together, his shoulders tensing, just for a second, before he reached out and gently patted her head. Mommy, he said, voice quieter than Serafina had ever heard it. Mommy has gone to a better place now. Serafina frowned. Then, I want to visit her. Her father's breath hitched. His hands trembled just barely. Then, without warning, he pulled her into a tight embrace, crushing her against him. Please, Sarah, he whispered, voice raw. Never say that. You can't visit her. Serafina didn't understand. Not yet. But soon she would. Her mother was dead. And everything changed. Her father, the sect leader of Mount Hua, withdrew. From her. From the sect. From everything except training. He buried himself in training, pushing past his limits, chasing a single obsession, surpassing the martial king. Then came son Zenith. Prodigy. A talent too bright to ignore. Li Zenith adopted him, took him in, raised him as his own. And son? He despised Serafina. It wasn't immediate. Not at first. But resentment festered. And before long, the weight of expectations, the clash of talent, and the sheer inevitability of their rivalry turned his dislike into something worse. Serafina learned. She learned that warmth was fleeting, that trust could wither, that loss was a weight you carried alone. So she grew cold. Because what else could she do? Serafina looked at Arthur. At first, she thought he was just telling her to open her eyes, to look at the ice flies, to remember what she had forgotten. But then she saw it. Arthur wasn't just looking at the ice flies. He was thinking of something else. He was remembering something else. And whatever it was, it hurt. Serafina had always been good at reading people. It was why Arthur fascinated her so much. He wasn't an easy person to read. But when you watched closely enough, the cracks appeared. And right now, she could tell. The pain Arthur was hiding. It was worse than hers. Arthur, Serafina said, her voice quiet, but firm. Arthur exhaled, staring up at the drifting cyan lights, his hands tucked into his pockets. Memories are a funny thing, Serafina, he said. We humans like to think we remember things as they happened. But we don't. We're biased. Our memories twist, warp, shift under the weight of emotions. We forget things we want to remember, and we remember things we'd give anything to forget. Serafina understood. She had been young when her mother died, too young to recall every detail, but the memory of the funeral? That had never faded. It was sharp, vivid. A wound she had carried for years. But in the end, Arthur said, finally looking at her, there was a hint of a smile there, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Aren't memories proof? Proof? She echoed. Proof that we lived, Arthur said. Proof that we felt. Even if our memories are flawed, even if they're shaped by emotion, they're still ours. They show us where we've been, what we've been through, what we are, what we'll become. Serafina's fingers curled slightly. Arthur's voice was calm, steady, but there was something beneath it, something deeper. So, Serafina, he said, his gaze steady, unwavering, don't forget, don't bury them. In this world, the best thing you can do is remember the ones who need to be remembered. She watched him for a long moment, the ice flies flickering around them, their soft glow reflecting in both their eyes. And then, finally, she nodded. Even now, you are the Northern Sea Ice Palace, Arthur said, stepping closer. His voice was steady, his expression unreadable, except for the faintest curve of a smile. Even now, you're still that little half-elf girl who played in the snow here, who gasped at the sight of ice flies, who loved this island like it was a part of her. That will never change. Serafina stared at him, her breath curling in the frigid air. Arthur, she murmured. I don't get it. Her fingers curled slightly, gripping onto nothing. I look at you and I think I have an idea. You've suffered a lot. And yet you smile. You manipulate people, yet you care so deeply. How are you like this? Arthur's expression didn't shift. If anything, his smile deepened. But there was something unreadable behind it. Something distant. Someone once told me, he said, never stop being human. Never stop feeling. Never stop living. He exhaled softly, the cold stealing away his breath like a whisper. So I do. As long as I'm alive, I feel. I may use people to protect those I care about, but I'm also the one who will protect them when I can. Serafina didn't look away. Truth. Everything in her told her he wasn't lying. Every instinct, every observation, every quiet moment she had spent watching him, trying to unravel what made him Arthur Nightingale. And wasn't that why she had fallen in love with him? Serafina clenched her fists. I don't care, she thought. I don't care if he's not the second hero. He doesn't need to be. Because there is no one more like a hero than Arthur in my eyes. Even if she was wrong. Even if she was biased. It didn't matter. Slowly, she dropped to one knee in the snow. Arthur's eyes widened. Serafina? Serafina Zenith, she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Swear to be Arthur Nightingale's knight. Arthur stared. Serafina, what? He cut himself off, visibly flustered. What are you doing? A knight's vow, Serafina replied simply. I may not be a knight in title, but I wield a sword, and I swear it to you. I want to fight for you, with you, forever. Her words were quiet, but absolute, because Serafina had made her choice. She couldn't imagine fighting for anyone else. Arthur let out a breath, running a hand through his hair, clearly exasperated. Don't be my knight, he muttered, shaking his head. Before she could respond, he reached down, gripping her arms and pulled her up. Her breath hitched, her cheeks turning red. Not from the cold, but from the sudden closeness. Knights can't do that with their masters, you know? Arthur muttered, and the teasing smirk on his face made her entire body heat up. Serafina narrowed her eyes. Then, before Arthur could react, she grabbed onto his shoulders, wrapped her legs around his waist, and kissed him, deeply. The second time she kissed Arthur. And as she felt his arms tighten around her, Serafina made another vow. She would always be his sword. Chapter 203. I let go of Serafina, both of us gasping for breath. The cold air bit at my skin, but it didn't matter. My face felt hot. Serafina, too, seemed to realize exactly what position we'd ended up in. Her legs were still wrapped around my back, her body pressed close. A heartbeat later, she swiftly pulled away, and I gently set her back down on the snow-covered ground. She looked at me, eyes unreadable. Arthur, she said, her voice softer than usual. Thank you, for convincing me to come here, for showing me this. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair in an attempt to ground myself. Well, it's not over yet, I said. There's still more to see. Serafina simply nodded. No teasing remark, no sharp retort, just quiet understanding. We decided to set up camp right there, beneath the glowing ice flies. Sleep should have come easily. Didn't. I lay in my tent, staring at the ceiling, thoughts running in 1,000 directions. I tried to focus, to plan, to strategize, but I couldn't think. Because every time I closed my eyes, I kept remembering Serafina. Her touch, her warmth, her lips. I'd always found her beautiful, ethereal, like something that belonged to the stars rather than this world. But now it was different, because I had kissed her, twice, because I had held her in my arms. And because, for the first time, I wasn't just looking at Serafina the prodigy, Serafina the daughter of legends, or Serafina the cold, untouchable swordswoman. I was looking at Serafina, and she was cute. I groaned, turning over in my bed, trying, and failing, to battle the insomnia creeping up on me. I barely managed to drag myself up in the morning. The bed, at least, was a masterpiece of modern engineering. Compact but absurdly comfortable, lined with adaptive temperature regulation and weight-adjusting foam. I still had no idea how people in the past had survived with wooden beds. I love the technology in this world. Stepping outside, I scanned the area, my mana senses ready to locate Serafina, and then a snowball hit the back of my head. I blinked. Given that it had no mana infused in it, and no hostile intent, I hadn't instinctively dodged it. But that didn't mean I wasn't caught completely off guard. Snowballs? Really, princess? I asked, turning around. Seraphina stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, a tiny, victorious smile tugging at her lips. She was dressed in just a t-shirt and shorts, completely out of place against the backdrop of ice and snow. But then again, she was Seraphina Zenith. Half-elf, ice crystal jade body, immune to the cold. She raised a hand. Ice mana flickered to life, effortlessly pulling together fresh snow, shaping it into a perfect sphere. Then, with all the casual elegance of someone throwing a priceless artifact off a building, she hurled it at my face. I dodged. "You have been warned," I said. She simply raised an eyebrow and conjured another. And just like that, it began. A snowball fight where mana was only used for the slow generation of ammunition, but the battle itself? That was pure skill. And I won. But not without a fight. The moment I dodged the first snowball, Seraphina's eyes sharpened, and I knew she had accepted the unspoken challenge. Without hesitation, she flicked her wrist, ice mana swirling as fresh snow gathered in her palm, packing into a perfectly formed sphere with almost surgical precision. She threw it fast. Too fast. I barely dodged in time, the snowball whizzing past my ear, kicking up frost as it smashed into a nearby tree. All right, she's taking this seriously. I scooped up snow with my bare hands, rolling it quickly. No fancy mana work, just good old-fashioned efficiency, and hurled it straight at her. She leaned to the side, dodging it effortlessly. Then she smirked, and that was when I realized I was in trouble. Seraphina moved fast. Too fast for someone whose fighting style usually leaned on precision rather than speed. But here, in the cold, in the snow, she was in her element. She weaved through the fight like a ghost through a blizzard, ice flies flickering in the background as if nature itself had chosen to decorate the battlefield. She didn't just throw snowballs. She calculated. She started curving them, arcing them high so that they came down like falling missiles, forcing me to dodge in unpredictable ways. She bounced them off trees, making them ricochet at impossible angles. And the worst part? She wasn't even using mana enhancement, which meant she was just naturally this good at aiming. I wasn't about to lose, though. If Seraphina had accuracy, I had adaptability. Instead of throwing blindly, I started predicting her movements. The way she dipped to avoid one shot, the way her body twisted before a throw, small tells tiny patterns. I adjusted. I led my shots, and I started landing hits. The first one clipped her shoulder, sending a spray of snow across her side. The second? Direct hit. Right in the stomach. She gasped, momentarily thrown off balance, and I pressed the attack. Two more rapid-fire shots, one grazing her leg, the other landing squarely on her torso. She stumbled back, blinking in shock, and then, a sudden curveball caught me square in the face. The cold bit at my skin, and I stumbled back, blinking away the shock and betrayal of that particularly vicious shot. Silence. Then Seraphina laughed. A real, genuine laugh, light and clear in the frozen air. She looked at me, grinning, her golden eyes bright, her expression completely free of the weight she usually carried. I wiped the snow off my face, sighing dramatically. All right, I'll admit it. That was a good shot. Good. She raised an eyebrow. That was perfect. I shook my head, rolling my shoulders. Sure. But in the end, I smirked, dusting the last of the snow off my jacket. I still won. Seraphina, however, seemed to have developed an alternative interpretation of the outcome. Everyone won since we had fun, she said as we packed up the tents, storing them back in our spatial rings. I smirked. Don't be a sore loser, Sarah. She narrowed her eyes at me, expression flat. You're awfully smug for someone who got hit in the face twice. Strategic sacrifices, I said, brushing a bit of lingering snow off my sleeve. A small price to pay for victory. Seraphina sighed, shaking her head. Fine. Champion of snowball warfare. Where are we going now? The center, I said. Her expression shifted. Slightly. A flicker of something unreadable. You mean, the main palace? I nodded. Yeah, I said. There's something important there. She didn't argue. She didn't need to. Instead, we walked. The ruins of the northern sea ice palace stretched before us. A stark contrast of untouched white snow and the wreckage of what had once been one of the strongest sects in the world. But as we moved deeper into the island, something became increasingly clear. The main palace hadn't just fallen. It had been annihilated. At a distance, it still had shape, still held the outline of what had once been a grand fortress of ice and magic, carved by elven hands and reinforced by the finest architects of the era. But up close, it was wreckage. Massive pillars, cracked and broken, their once flawless carvings eroded by time and war. The great entrance hall, where mages and warriors once gathered, was now nothing more than a skeletal structure. Its towering ice walls fractured, its supporting beams snapped, its very foundations split like a wound in the earth. The staircases, which had once spiraled up in elegant arcs, now hung precariously, some half-collapsed, others leading to nowhere but open sky. The ceiling was gone, completely. Only shattered remnants remained, jagged edges framing the cold sky above. And at the very heart of the ruin, the throne room, or what was left of it, the seat of power, once belonging to the palace lord of the northern sea ice palace, was now nothing but a fractured platform. The throne itself toppled, cracked down the middle, its intricate elven craftsmanship almost unrecognizable beneath layers of ice and decay. The sigils of the sect, once glowing with mana, were faded, their enchantments long since burned out. Serafina walked beside me in silence, her fingers grazing the frozen remains of a collapsed wall. "It's worse than I thought," she muttered. I didn't say anything, because we hadn't even reached the most important part yet. "Can you sense it, Luna?" "Yeah," she responded. "Let me guide you." I nodded inwardly, letting my mana flow under her direction. There was something here, something beneath the ruin, buried under the weight of time and tragedy. "Erebus," I murmured, activating Lucent Harmony. A rift tore open in the air beside me, dark and seamless, as Erebus stepped through, his skeletal form emerging like a shadow given shape. "Erebus," I said, keeping my voice even. "You'll follow Serafina's orders. Use bone armor on her. Help her." Erebus bowed. "Yes, master." Serafina crossed her arms, watching as crimson bones shot toward her. They wrapped around her body like a second skin, forming a protective layer. Not cumbersome, but reinforced, designed for resilience. She tilted her head slightly, examining the armor with wary curiosity. "That's serious?" "Well, yeah," I said. And then the world around us warped. The air rippled, twisting at the edges of reality, as if we had stepped across an unseen threshold. The ruins blurred, the shattered palace flickering. One moment solid, the next shifting, like a mirage threatening to vanish. Serafina tensed. I turned to her, smiling slightly. "How do you feel about a dungeon dive?" Her usual composure broke. Her ice-blue eyes widened, her mouth opening slightly in shock. "Oh, right. I probably should have explained that part first." Chapter 204. What exactly were dungeons? The simplest answer? A mess of space-time nonsense held together by monsters and bad luck. More specifically, dungeons were hotspots for mana beasts, places where the very fabric of reality twisted itself into a knot, creating pocket dimensions separate from the world outside. Step into one, and you weren't just walking into a cave or ruin, you were entering something entirely different. Something that shouldn't exist, yet somehow did. Dungeons were ranked from 1 star to 9 star, just like mana beasts. Except 1-star dungeons didn't actually exist. They were more of a footnote, a theoretical baseline, like writing level 1 in a game where the tutorial tried to kill you. The real dungeons started at 2-star and climbed up to 9-star, each one home to a boss monster matching its rank and a horde of weaker creatures swarming within. And if the boss died, the entire dungeon collapsed. Which led to the biggest mystery of dungeons. Why did killing a single mana beast unravel an entire alternate dimension? It wasn't like the boss was actively holding the dungeon together. It didn't expend mana to stabilize the warp space. It just existed, and somehow its death was enough to tear reality apart from the inside out. Theories existed. Some claimed dungeons were born from supernatural events, places where mana had warped so violently that it folded in on itself, creating a self-contained bubble of chaos. Others suggested they were simply natural fluctuations of spacetime, like wrinkles in reality that happened with or without the boss monster inside. The second theory made more sense, mostly because dungeons kept appearing all over the world, too frequent to be caused by some ancient catastrophe every single time. And the dungeon that had formed here, in the ruins of the Northern Sea Ice Palace? It was a 6-star dungeon. In the novel, she had conquered it alongside Lucifer, back when she was already at low integration rank. And even then, it had been laughably easy. Barely a challenge for her, and even less of one for Lucifer, who had been even stronger. But now we were much, much weaker than that. I was at white rank. Serafina was at high silver rank. A full 2 ranks below where she had been in the novel when she first faced this place. Which was why I handed Erebus over to her. She needed the boost. Not because she was weak, because this dungeon wasn't meant to be cleared by me. This was her trial. I was just here to support her. What we wanted from this dungeon wasn't just survival. It was the reward, the ice crystal lotus, the lost treasure of the Northern Sea Ice Palace. Somehow it had escaped destruction. Or rather, it had been absorbed by the dungeon, pulled into this warped pocket of reality when the palace fell. That lotus wasn't just a relic. It was the key to Serafina's future. If she obtained it, it would grant her enlightenment, sharpening her understanding of her own gift, ice crystal jade body. Right now, she could already balance the 2 opposing concepts of freezing and blossoming, but this would push her beyond balance. This would merge them, not just as 2 coexisting forces, but as a new concept entirely, one she could wield as her own art, independent of Mount Hua's teachings. She had done it in the novel, but much later. This would let her do it now. And that changed everything. Arthur. Serafina's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to her just as she tensed, her gaze flickering forward. What is? Focus? I said, cutting her off. I lifted a hand, pointing ahead. She followed my gaze. Then she saw them. A dozen 4-star presences. Their mana signatures prickling against our senses. Silverback wolves. Large, muscular. Their fur gleaming like polished steel beneath the dim dungeon light. Their eyes glowed with predatory hunger. Low growls rumbling from deep within their throats as they paced forward, circling, assessing us. Serafina inhaled sharply, steadying herself. Serafina, I said. My voice calmed despite the tension in the air. She glanced at me. Trust me? I said simply, a smile pulling at my lips. She held my gaze for a moment longer, then turned back toward the approaching wolves, her hand tightening around her sword hilt. The crimson bone armor I had given her through Erebus wrapped around her form, fitting her as if it had always belonged to her. Suited her. A warrior forged from ice and blood. And then, the wolves attacked. Are you not going to help her? Luna's voice echoed in my mind as I stood back, watching Serafina rush at her opponents. I don't need to, I replied. I need to conserve my strength for the 6-star dungeon boss as well. That thing was going to be a problem. Serafina could handle the wolves just fine. But the boss? That wasn't something she could take on alone. Not at her current level, not even with Erebus reinforcing her. Mana beasts were, in general, weaker than humans at the same level. Sure, they had absurd physical strength, heightened instincts, and natural adaptations, but they fell behind in the finer aspects of combat. They lacked arts, tactical training, and, most importantly, the human ability to push beyond limits in ways that defied all logic. Not to mention, the mana core system humans used was vastly superior to the beast's mana star system in terms of efficiency. That was why I had been able to kill a 5-star beast at just mid-silver rank, despite the seemingly massive gap in raw mana quantity and quality. But a 6-star beast? That was a different story. The jump from white rank to low integration rank was where mana underwent the most drastic transformation, a full 10-fold increase in both power and capacity. The boss of this dungeon had been weak for its level, which was why Serafina had been able to slaughter it easily in the novel when she had already reached low integration rank. But right now, with her at high silver rank and me at white rank, even together it would be a challenge. The wolves, though? Serafina made short work of them. Her blade flashed, and with it, the air filled with a flurry of sai and plum blossoms. Manifestations of her sword intent, blooming midair before slicing through the pack like razors. She moved like flowing water, weaving effortlessly between the wolves, her strikes both precise and merciless. Every step was calculated, every movement part of an intricate dance of death. Her swordsmanship was beautiful, sharp yet delicate, precise yet fluid. It carried the very spirit of Mount Hua, a balance of grace and lethality, of elegance and destruction. She didn't just cut down her enemies. She painted the battlefield with their demise. Serafina exhaled, her plum blossoms dissolving into the air, their fleeting glow vanishing like embers in the wind. The wolves lay slaughtered, their bodies frozen, cut apart with an efficiency that bordered on artistry. She straightened, her breath steady despite the fight. Then, she turned to me. "Explain," she said.
No accusation. No anger.
Just calm suspicion, sharp and measured. I walked up to her casually, hands in my pockets, as if we weren't standing in the middle of a dungeon filled with unknown threats. "6-star dungeon," I said. "There's something here that we need to get for you." Her gaze didn't waver. "How do you know?" Her voice was smooth, but I could hear the shift, doubt creeping in, wrapping around the edges of her words. "And welfare." It wasn't exactly normal to randomly drag someone into a sealed-off dungeon in the ruins of their dead mother's palace, and just so happened to know that there was some once-in-a-lifetime treasure waiting at the end. I looked at her, considering my next words carefully. I couldn't tell her the truth, that I had transmigrated from another world, that I had read this life as a novel before waking up inside it. That to me, she had once been just words on a page before becoming something much more. The answer should have been simple. I should lie. It was the safest option, the smartest option. But I thought back to her kneeling in the snow, ready to vow herself to me. She had trusted me. I should trust her. So I will tell her a white lie with a secret of mine. "I bonded with a Chelan," I said finally. "That's where lucent harmony comes from. As you know, a Chelan can read the flow of fate itself, which is why I know about this place." Serafina's eyes widened. Her ice-blue gaze searched mine, assessing, analyzing. Then, after a long moment, she tucked a strand of silver hair behind her slightly pointed ear, exhaling slowly. "Thank you for telling me," she said. I smiled. "I trust you like you trust me." She said nothing, but I saw it. The way her shoulders relaxed, the way the tension in her stance cooled, just slightly. Because even if she trusted me, this whole situation, a dungeon on a sealed-off island, that I somehow knew about but never mentioned before, had left her on edge. Now at least she had an answer. "Let's go," Serafina said, and together we stepped deeper into the unknown. Chapter 205. Arthur lied to me. Serafina walked beside him, her steps light against the ground, but her mind was anything but still. She could tell. Somewhat. Not quite. It wasn't obvious, even to her. No, it wasn't a lie. Not fully. It was something blurred, something between truth and deception, woven together so seamlessly that most people wouldn't have noticed at all. But Serafina wasn't most people. So she picked it apart. Arthur had said 4 things. 1. A Chelan can read fate, which was also a well-accepted and documented fact about Chelans. 2. Arthur bonded with a Chelan. 3. Lucent harmony was the beast will of that Chelan. 4. Because of that, Arthur knew about this dungeon. The first? True. Well-documented. Accepted fact. A Chelan was one of the few creatures in existence that could perceive fate itself. The rest? They were trickier. If Arthur really had bonded with a Chelan, it would explain how he unlocked lucent harmony so late. Gifts usually awakened before someone reached yellow rank. Arthur had already been at silver rank when his manifested. That wasn't normal. Then again, bonding with a mythical beast wasn't normal either. The Viserians were the only ones known to have done it. They had built their entire empire around the fact that they had bonded with Tiamat, a radiant dragon, granting them draconic traits and unmatched power as a result. And yet, there's no other way he could know. The Northern Sea Ice Palace had been sealed off from the world for over a decade. Her father's orders had been absolute. No one was allowed to set foot here, not even the most powerful people in the world unless they wanted to antagonize Mo Zenith. Only exceptions were Serafina and Mo himself, and whoever they wished to bring with them. And yet, Arthur knew. Not just that something was here, he knew exactly what. There had been no monitoring on the island itself, only on the Frostvale Sea surrounding it. Meaning, the only way Arthur could have found out was if someone had broken her father's decree, come to this island, discovered the dungeon, and spread the information. But no one had. Which meant, Arthur's explanation made sense. If he had bonded with a Chelan and that Chelan had seen this in the threads of fate, then yes, he could know about the dungeon. This was a suitable explanation for how Arthur knew about the iceflies as well. But then, why did I feel like he was lying? Serafina frowned slightly, barely perceptible, her mind whirring like a finely tuned machine. Had she misread him? That was hard to believe. She had spent years honing this skill, reading people, understanding them, seeing the tiny shifts in their expressions, their words, their silences. And it was easier to be fooled the other way, to believe someone was telling the truth when they were lying. But this was different. Arthur's words had been too careful, too smooth, like someone who had practiced telling just enough truth to be believable. Which meant either 1. Arthur had somehow learned about this dungeon another way, and was using the Qilin as a cover. 2. Arthur was telling the truth, but there was something more he couldn't or wouldn't say. Serafina glanced at him from the corner of her eye. He looked completely at ease, walking ahead, hands in his pockets, eyes focused on the path forward, like a man with no secrets at all. But I know better than that. How did you meet the Qilin? Serafina asked. Arthur didn't hesitate. I went to the Isle of Azure Breeze with Rachel during the fall break, he said. During the fight against the 5-star storm serpent that evolved into 6-star abyssal tide serpent, I was lucky enough to meet Luna. She found me interesting and chose me. Serafina watched him carefully. Lie mixed with truth. The kind of lie that was too carefully measured. Just enough reality to be convincing. Just enough fiction to conceal whatever he didn't want to say. She tested the waters. Does that mean you're the one destined to be the emperor of the world? Qilins only chose individuals with the fate to rule. They didn't make mistakes. They didn't hedge their bets. If Luna had chosen Arthur, it meant she had seen something in him. And Serafina? She could believe it. At White Rank he had created a lich. He wielded both White Star and Black Star, even if they came from Lucent Harmony. His swordsmanship was better than even Lucifer's, and his ability to read people, to plan ahead, to manipulate a battlefield like a chessboard? It was monstrous. Arthur was more than capable of rising to the top. He tilted his head, considering her words. Then, finally, he said, perhaps. His voice was light, casual, unreadable. Luna didn't specify. Serafina's expression remained calm. But internally, another lie. Unlike his previous answer, which had been a mix of truth and falsehood, this one was completely fabricated. Which meant, Luna had specified. Arthur knew exactly what his fate was. And if he was destined to become the emperor of the world, he would have just said so. He didn't like lying to her. He had made that clear. If the truth was something as simple as him being chosen for greatness, he wouldn't be dodging the question. Which meant his fate was something else entirely. Something he didn't want to tell her. Serafina's mind churned, piecing it together. Arthur was intelligent, brilliant, even. He knew he couldn't lie convincingly in front of her. He had to know she'd see through it. So why do it? Why lie in a way that he knew she would catch? And then suddenly it clicked. He wants me to doubt him. Arthur wasn't just concealing information. He was guiding her toward a conclusion, one he couldn't say outright, but wanted her to understand. He wanted Serafina to understand him without him telling her directly. But why? What are you hiding, Arthur? She glanced at him. His expression was unreadable, his posture relaxed, his hands still in his pockets as he walked beside her like they were strolling through a city and not stepping deeper into a 6-star dungeon. But she knew better. So, for now, she said nothing. She would figure it out. We're here, Arthur said, stopping in front of a massive stone door, its surface covered in intricate carvings of ice and swirling patterns of mana, long since dulled by time. Serafina halted beside him, eyes scanning the door, her breath curling in the cold air. What's inside? She asked. There had been no beasts guarding this place, no signs of a battle waiting for them. That was unusual. Arthur exhaled. Luna told me it's a trial. A trial. Serafina's brows furrowed slightly. Not all dungeons were just lairs filled with mana beasts. Some, particularly those older, deeper, and more anomalous, contained spell array trials instead. And trials were always more dangerous. They weren't about fighting and winning. They were about enduring. And usually they were mentally taxing rather than physical taxing. The existence of a trial means fewer beasts, which explains the fact that we only met a dozen 4-star beasts before reaching here, Serafina noted. Arthur nodded. Do you know the nature of the trial? She asked. His gaze flickered toward the door. A difficult mental trial, he said. It plays on your past. Makes you relive it. Serafina didn't flinch, but there was a quiet shift in her expression. Something small, something almost imperceptible. It wasn't fear, but it was recognition. A test of memory, of past pain and trauma. A trial like this wasn't just about facing enemies. It was about facing yourself and trying not to drown in your own past. She breathed in slowly, then exhaled, steadying herself, bringing her mind into sharp, controlled focus. Even though she was disciplined, even though she had honed her emotions to precision, there were still fault lines in her psyche. After all, she was still a teenage girl. Weak points a trial like this would target without mercy. If she wasn't careful, if she wasn't in complete control, it could break her. She wouldn't allow that. She couldn't. "Ready?" Arthur asked, his voice even. Seraphina's eyes met his. His presence steadied her and calmed her nerves. She nodded. The door rumbled, its carved surface shifting, the ancient magic within it stirring as it began to open. They stepped inside, and the past swallowed them whole. Chapter 206. Two ragged breaths echoed in the darkness. The only light in the room flickered weakly from a screen, casting jagged blue lines across the cracked floor. Aside from the uneven breaths, the only sound was the rapid staccato of typing, the frantic rhythm of desperation hammering against a keyboard. The boy's chest tightened as his fingers flew over the keys, his mind racing ahead, calculating exit routes, contingency plans, probability shifts, but none of it mattered if the footsteps kept getting closer. A dash, the girl beside him started, her voice barely above a whisper. He slapped a hand over her mouth. "Wait!" His fingers moved one last time. Command executed. Somewhere, something exploded. The footsteps stopped. A voice cursed, followed by the sound of hurried retreating steps. A small victory, but a temporary one. The boy exhaled sharply, scanning the data on his screen. Finally, an opening. His shoulders slumped in relief as he snapped the laptop shut and picked it up by the handle on the briefcase. "Come on," he said, grabbing it and turning to the girl at his side. She didn't move. "I'm at my limit," Emma rasped, her voice thin and strained. Her disheveled hair clung to her sweat-slicked forehead, her skin pale from blood loss. The boy's jaw clenched. A bullet wound in the leg. She had been pushing through the pain for hours, but now her body was giving out. "You can't be," he muttered, kneeling beside her, urgency creeping into his voice. "We'll survive together." Emma gave him a tired smile, but it was tinged with something heavy, something that made his gut twist. "We won't," she said quietly. "You're brilliant, but even you can't make the impossible happen." He gritted his teeth. "That's wrong." His hands curled into fists. "I calculated everything. My commands, my predictions, they were perfect." His breath hitched. If only I were older, stronger, if I had just a little more time." Emma's fingers twitched. She reached out, brushing her fingertips against his clenched fist, her touch light, fragile. "You're too smart for your own good," she whispered. "Even the gods above would be envious of your talent." He let out a sharp, bitter scoff. "A talent that makes gods weep in envy?" His voice wavered, raw with frustration. "What's the point of talent if I can't protect you?" Emma's expression faltered, just for a second. "Power," he whispered, his voice trembling. "If I just had power, I would have." His breath hitched, his mind racing through all the paths, the strategies, the alternate possibilities, but none of them mattered, because in every calculation, Emma didn't make it out. Emma squeezed his hand. "Don't do this," she said. "It's not your fault." The boy shook his head. "It is," he said, his voice thick with anger. "Not at her. Not at the world. At himself. I should be better. I need to make better plans. Smarter strategies. No matter how impossible." His breath was ragged. "I am better." Emma looked at him, her heart aching at the sight. But she couldn't let him throw his life away for her. He was too young. She was young too, but she had already drowned in too much darkness. "Please," she whispered. "Save yourself." He froze. Her voice wavered, but she forced the words out. "Don't try to save me," Emma pleaded. "I told you before. I used you. You don't get it, do you?" Her voice cracked. "When I saved you from those bullies, I was just doing my job." His eyes darkened, but he didn't speak. "I was a spy," Emma said, forcing a laugh that sounded too hollow to be real. "I'm the reason they're after you. The reason a 14-year-old genius is on the run." She clenched her jaw, her body trembling. "Stop caring about me. Just go. Live your fucking life." The boy sat in silence. Then, after a moment, he smiled. Not a sad smile. Not a bitter smile. Just a knowing one. "You think I didn't know?" he said softly. Emma's breath caught. "I knew," he said, shaking his head. From the moment you saved me, I knew you weren't doing it out of goodwill. Emma stared at him, her lips parting slightly, but no words came out. But it didn't matter, the boy continued. His smile didn't fade. Because that was the first time I ever understood kindness. Emma's heart twisted. The time we spent together, the boy said, his voice quiet but steady. Tell me, Emma. His eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unwavering. Was it just me? Was it all for nothing? Emma couldn't breathe, because she remembered their days. Two outcasts, one a spy, used and discarded by the world's most powerful agencies. The other a genius whose very existence invited hatred and envy. Their time together, their laughter, their stolen moments of peace. Could she really say it was nothing? Emma's throat tightened. Yes, she forced out. I don't care about any of it. I was just doing my mission. She clenched her fists. Even now, I'm just doing my duty. She let out a hollow, shaking laugh. Look at me. I slowed you down, right? She gritted her teeth. I did my job. I did my job. The boy didn't flinch. He just kept smiling. You're lying. Emma froze. The boy's voice was gentle, certain, unshaken. Those days, they meant everything to you too. His fingers curled around hers, firm, steady. So we'll live together. Don't lie to me now, Emma whispered. Her voice was hoarse, her breath shallow, but her gaze burned with a finality that made Arthur's stomach twist. You know it won't happen. Arthur didn't respond, because he knew. She had always been able to read him, to see past his walls, his calculations, his endless plans. And now, in this moment, she saw everything. I can't give you up, Emma, he said, his voice cracking. Giving you up is like giving up myself. I just can't. Emma grabbed his collar, yanking him forward, forcing him to look at her. You must. Her hands trembled against his shirt, but her grip was ironclad. Even if you somehow pull off a miracle, even if your genius mind outplays every agent on this goddamn planet. Her breath hitched. I'll die anyway, Arthur. The words punched through him like a bullet. I need treatment now, and you can't get us both out in time. So finally, please, please leave me. Live. Arthur's entire world cracked at the edges. His throat burned. His chest felt tight, like something was caving in. Emma was crying. She never cried. Don't waste more time, she sobbed, gripping his shirt as if trying to anchor herself. Don't die for me. You can't. I won't allow it. Arthur opened his mouth. He had to say something, had to stop this, had to. Emma kissed him. For just a second, time froze. Her lips were cold, but her touch was desperate, like she was burning the moment into him, carving it into his memory. Then, she pulled away. This is goodbye, she whispered, and before he could even react, she shoved him backward. Arthur stumbled, his heart slamming against his ribs, panic ripping through him as Emma turned and ran. Emma! Arthur chased her, his mind working at light speed, his eyes scanning every possible escape, every last-second solution. But the distraction he had created earlier had scattered the agents, moved them out of the way. The two of them burst onto the rooftop, and suddenly there was nowhere left to run. Emma skidded to a stop at the edge of the building, her hair whipping in the wind. Arthur stopped a few feet away. His chest heaved. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to look at him, and she smiled. Live for us, Arthur, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the wind like an unbreakable command. His breath caught. You must live for us. Forget about revenge. Just live. She took a small step backward. That's revenge enough, she continued. Against a world that wants to use you. Arthur moved, but too late. And please, she whispered. She let go. Be happy. She fell. Arthur lunged to the edge, his fingers grasping at nothing. His breath caught in his throat as Emma plummeted, her figure growing smaller against the sea of lights below. He couldn't breathe. His vision blurred. And for the first time in his life, Arthur's calculations failed him. That was the day Arthur lost Emma, because he was too weak to save her. Chapter 207. Serafina was somewhere else entirely. Back in a memory as sharp and biting as the frost in the air. It began with laughter. Soft, clear, like ice chimes tinkling in the wind. It echoed through the grand halls of the Northern Sea Ice Palace, a place of shimmering cold and breathtaking beauty. In her mind's eye, she saw her mother moving through those halls, her presence commanding yet elegant, her footsteps barely making a sound against the polished floors of enchanted ice. Sculptures lined the corridors, serpents twisting in frozen coils, wolves locked mid-leap, plum blossoms caught in an eternal moment of bloom. The palace was a wonderland. It was a place where the air itself carried a quiet melody, where the walls seemed to glow under the pale northern lights, where her mother's laughter turned the winter cold into something warm and alive. Serafina, small and bright-eyed, had once followed at her mother's heels, trying to step exactly where she stepped, her little feet crunching in the snow-dusted halls. Her mother's hand was warm as it closed around hers, her voice a gentle hum of stories and promises. One day, this palace will be yours. Serafina had believed it once, but memories have a cruel way of turning. The cold that had once been comforting became suffocating. She wasn't there when the palace fell, when the enemy descended like shadows stretching across the ice. She had been at Mount Hua Sect under her father's care, or rather under his shadow. She had not seen her mother's final stand, but she had heard the whispers, a storm of ice and steel, an explosion of magic that could have frozen the stars themselves, a final, desperate defense, and then nothing, gone. The news reached Mount Hua like an avalanche. A few words, spoken too quietly to hold the weight of what they carried. Her mother was dead. Her home was gone. Her father, her indomitable, untouchable father, did not look at her when he heard the news. He did not gather her into his arms, did not kneel to meet her gaze. He had simply turned away. From that moment on, he barely saw her at all. Serafina could count on one hand the number of times her father acknowledged her in the following years. He was consumed by something greater now, a singular, all-devouring goal. The martial king, the man who stood at the peak of the world, an obstacle in her father's relentless ascent. And Serafina? She was not an obstacle. She was simply nothing. She did not cry. She did not plead for his attention. She did not demand to be seen. Instead, she turned to the only person left, the boy her father had brought back from some far-off battlefield. Son Zenith. He was 4 years older than her, quiet and composed, a boy who was already a legend in the making. Serafina had wanted to believe in him. She had wanted to believe she was not completely alone. She found him alone one day, standing beneath the great plum blossom tree in the sect's courtyard, where the pink petals fell like slow-moving snow. In her small hand, she held one of those petals, soft, delicate, the very symbol of Mount Hua's philosophy. She stepped forward, gathering her courage. "Son," she said, offering the flower. For a moment he looked at her, and then smack. His hand knocked hers aside, the blossom tumbling to the ground. He stepped on it, grinding it into the dirt without a word, before walking away. Serafina did not move. She did not cry. She only looked at the crushed petal beneath his heel, her hands curling into fists. She was 6 years old, and she understood then that she had no brother. That was the last time she reached for him. The years passed. Serafina was not alone. Not truly. Her uncle was kind, and the elders adored her, but she always felt it. The emptiness where a father's love should be. The absence of warmth in a home that was never really hers. By 15, she was admitted to Mythos Academy, the best academy in the world. Her father had barely acknowledged the achievement. Son had set records. He was the youngest descendant ranker in history. His name was whispered with awe, his future already decided. A ruler, a kingmaker, a monster among prodigies. By comparison, Serafina's accomplishments meant nothing. She did not care. She was strong. That was all that mattered. Then, she arrived at the academy and she met them. The monsters of Class 1A. Rachel Creighton, the Saintess of Order. Cecilia Slatemark, the Archwitch. Lucifer Windward, the Prince of Prodigies. Rinkagu, the Warborn. Jean Ashbluff, the Necromancer Prince. Ian Vizirian, the Draconic Heir. And at the very bottom of that list, Arthur Nightingale. She did not pay him much attention at first. Rank 8. Weak. Forgettable. She assumed he would be replaced soon, relegated to Class B where he belonged. But he wasn't. He grew stronger, faster than anyone expected. She watched as he drew Rachel's curiosity, Cecilia's amusement, Lucifer's cautious respect. She began to see it, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he never seemed quite what he appeared to be. Arthur Nightingale was not weak. He was something else entirely. A puzzle more enigmatic than the prodigies who had already been written into history. And Seraphina? She was intrigued. She was confused. And, though she did not know it yet, she was falling into his orbit. Love was a mysterious thing. Sometimes it crept up like a slow-burning ember, warming gently before you even noticed. Other times, it struck like a sudden storm, all-consuming, impossible to ignore. The only constant truth about love? When you love someone, truly, your desire to be theirs outweighs everything else. Seraphina fell in love with him. Looking back, it felt inevitable. Arthur Nightingale, the man who kept defying expectations, who refused to be ordinary, whose very presence bent the world's narrative around him like a gravitational pull. His care for her, hidden beneath layers of wit and steel, unraveled her defenses in ways she hadn't expected. His voice, his presence, the way his azure eyes held her in their quiet depths, as if whispering that she belonged there, with him. She wasn't the only one. She saw it. She felt it. Arthur kept rising, like the tide, relentless and undeniable. He dethroned Lucifer windward, the man who had seemed unshakable, and in that moment, Seraphina had almost given everything to Arthur. Almost, but not quite. It was only when he returned to Mount Huasect, when he stood before her again, when he spoke with that same quiet certainty, not demanding, not pleading, just being there, that she understood the full weight of her feelings. And then he brought her here, to the place where her mother had died, the island she had never returned to, the trauma she had buried, the pain she had ignored, the memories she had locked away. All of it should have crushed her under its weight. But with Arthur it didn't feel heavy. With Arthur it felt light. With Arthur, everything felt right. She took a step forward, her breath catching as a figure emerged from the mist of memory. Platinum hair, almost silver, flowing like silk. Ice blue eyes, Seraphina's own eyes, but wiser, older, holding warmth where hers held frost. Her mother, not truly, of course, just an illusion, woven from magic and longing. But for a moment, just a moment, it didn't matter. Seraphina's hands trembled at her sides. "Mother," she whispered. The illusion did not speak, only watched her, the way she used to, calm, patient, understanding. Seraphina swallowed. Her voice wavered, but she pressed on. "I am not a bad daughter for wanting to move on, am I?" The illusion tilted her head. Silent. Seraphina clenched her fists. "I love you, Mother," she said, her voice stronger now, steadier. "I always have, but I can't be consumed by this anymore. I don't want to be consumed by it." She took a breath, one deep enough to settle something inside her. "I am done drowning in despair, in the unfairness of it all, in the emptiness of what I lost. Because—" her fingers brushed against her chest, where her heart beat steady and strong. "Because I found him." The illusion flickered, but her mother's gaze never wavered. Seraphina smiled, a real smile, small but certain. "I found him, the man who fills the void in my heart. The man who loves me, even when I struggle to love myself. The man who has done more for me than I ever thought possible. He is willing to go further for me than I have ever gone for him. And I want to try." Her breath hitched. She swallowed past the tightness in her throat, pushing through it. "We're far from perfect. We don't even have a relationship. Not yet. But I want to believe in it. I want to believe in us. Because you would want that for me, wouldn't you, Mother?" The illusion smiled. Not a grand, glowing expression. Just a soft, knowing look. A look Seraphina had forgotten, buried under years of frost and silence. Her chest ached. "This is goodbye," she whispered. Her voice cracked, and for once, she let it. She closed her eyes, exhaling softly. "I love you." When she opened them, the illusion was gone. Shattered like frost under sunlight. She was back in the room. The silence was vast, achingly real. A single tear slipped down her cheek, a crystalline drop of warmth against her cold skin. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, inhaled deeply, and steadied herself. And then, she saw him, Arthur, standing across the chamber, still trapped in his illusion. For the first time, Seraphina realized he had his own ghosts to face. She took a step toward him. Chapter 208. Emotions, in their most basic form, are glitches in an otherwise functional system, chemical reactions, electrical impulses, misfiring neurons that make humans irrational. They serve no tangible purpose, no logical advantage. And yet, they dictate lives, rewrite destinies, drive people to greatness or ruin. I had no use for them. At least that was what I told myself. I existed, nothing more. An orphan, with no name that mattered, no place that was truly mine, no connections tying me to the world. Survival was my only priority, and survival didn't require happiness, or sadness, or anger. It required efficiency. And so I trained myself to be precise, calculated, detached. Pain? Pain was irrelevant. Loneliness? That was simply an absence of people. Suffering? A temporary state of being. I was gray. Not black, not white, just gray. A shadow blending into the background, watching, observing, learning what made the world spin. I made an effort to fit in. Humans demanded it. If you did not act correctly, they noticed. So I tried. I spoke when spoken to, I mimicked their words, I calculated the correct responses. But I was always off. Just slightly. Enough for them to see the gaps, the pieces missing from whatever it was that made people people. And so I became an outcast. Then she came along. Emma. I remember the moment exactly. A simple event in a school hallway, familiar, predictable. A boy's hand grabbed the collar of my shirt, forcing me against a locker. He spoke, though his words hardly mattered. A threat? A demand? An insult? All of it was data, input with no real consequence. I did not react. That was incorrect, apparently. The second boy swung his fist. I calculated the movement, the trajectory, the speed at which impact would occur. It would hurt, but pain was just a signal, a thing to be noted and ignored. Then she intervened. Emma stepped in between us, her expression unreadable for a fraction of a second, before she smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a kind one. It was calculating, as though she was measuring her options, assessing the risks. She was not a savior, not a hero stepping in for justice. She saved me because she had something to gain. I knew it. I could see it. And yet, even if her reasons were wrong, even if they were selfish, she had still extended her hand. Kindness. Not the idealized kind found in old stories, not the pure and selfless kind people like to believe in. No, this was practical kindness, transactional kindness. It was the first time I had encountered it so directly. Up until then, every human interaction I had observed was self-serving in one way or another. People lied, they manipulated, they used others to advance themselves. Kindness, I had thought, was just another weapon, a tool to gain something. But receiving it, even in its flawed, imperfect form, was different. I wanted to understand. What did it feel like? What was kindness when you were on the other side of it? So I took her hand. Because in the end, despite everything, I was still human. Even if I didn't always feel like one. And from that moment on, everything changed. I became Emma's friend. It was not something I had planned, nor something I had particularly wanted. It simply happened, like a glitch in the system, an anomaly that I hadn't accounted for. She was, by every metric, different from me. Bubbly, loud, the kind of person who could walk into a silent room and fill it with sound and movement, as if existence itself had granted her the ability to make spaces brighter just by being in them. She was also popular, the kind of popular that wasn't just a result of looks or talent, but sheer persistence. People liked her because she made liking her seem effortless. She was always smiling, always happy, always bursting at the seams with unnecessary excitement over the most mundane details of the world. Like a dog, I thought, a particularly energetic retriever, wagging its metaphorical tail at everything. The weather, a new type of snack, an especially fluffy cloud. I observed this, waiting for it to wear off, for the enthusiasm to falter, for the gears beneath the mask to show. But Emma was persistent. And when she saw my lack of reaction to one of her particularly long-winded explanations about something that, as far as I could tell, had no relevance to anything important, she hesitated. Then, quite suddenly, her lips pushed out slightly, her eyebrows scrunched together. Her expression darkened, but not in anger, in something else. I narrowed my eyes. Was this pouting? I analyzed the micro-expressions, the subtle shifts in muscle movement. Yes, it was pouting. Interesting. A human reaction designed to invoke sympathy. A nonverbal cue meant to draw attention or elicit a response. A technique often used by children to get what they want from adults. Tactically effective. But why use it on me? Don't stare. Emma yelped. cheeks flushing a very distinct shade of red. I blinked. Ah, blushing. I ran through the biological explanation quickly. Involuntary reaction. Blood vessels in the face dilate, increasing circulation, causing visible redness. An evolutionary trait meant to signal embarrassment, attraction, or social discomfort. Simple, predictable. And yet, why was it interesting? It was just excess blood. A physical side effect, nothing more. And yet, I wanted to understand it. I wanted to see it again. I wanted to know why something so biologically insignificant felt like it mattered. Even though Emma was faking all of it. Why do you spend time with me? I asked Emma once during lunch. Just the two of us. The cafeteria was noisy, laughter, voices, the clatter of trays and utensils. A chaotic backdrop to a conversation that, for once, actually interested me. Unlike me, Emma had friends. A lot of them. She was the kind of person who could sit at any table and be welcomed. Like a particularly enthusiastic stray cat that everyone just accepted as part of the scenery. She didn't need to be here. With me. Emma blinked, mid-bite, then shrugged. I just want to. A dodge, not an answer. She didn't even try to make it convincing. She was lying. I could tell. The slight pause before she spoke. The flicker of something unreadable in her gaze. The way her fingers tensed just slightly around her fork before she forced herself to relax. There was an intention behind it. A reason. But I let it go. Because this was interesting. I had something to play with. A human puzzle. Layers to peel. What was the right word for it? Ah, toy. Emma was an interesting toy. A human who acted happy yet was clearly pretending. A girl who lied to me, who got close for an unknown reason, but wore her smile like armor. She was so happy, and yet, she wasn't. That contradiction was fascinating. And, most importantly, she was fun to play with. Puzzles were boring. Video games were too easy. The world rarely presented anything worth the effort of solving. But this was new. Emma made a good toy. That was how it began. Just a toy. Not something to care about. Not something to get attached to. Just an interesting puzzle. Something to pull apart and study. To test and watch. But over time, the world, the one I had always known, the one that was dull and gray and lifeless, changed. It was subtle at first. The way Emma's voice, loud and insistent, broke the monotony of my thoughts. The way her laugh, ridiculous, unnecessary, too much, filled the empty spaces between the ticks of a clock. Color seeped in, a little at a time. I didn't notice it at first, until I did. And by then it was too late. She had dyed my world in colors I didn't know how to name. Bright, sharp, messy things that didn't make sense but made everything feel more. And it wasn't just me. Emma stopped lying. At first, they were small cracks, hesitations in her perfect, easygoing mask. A look held just a second too long. The way her smile faltered, like a puppet strings pulled too tight. Then, one day, the mask shattered entirely. And there we were. Just two kids, standing in front of each other. No lies, no pretenses, no shields. Two kids who had found something real. And then, everything fell apart. I remember the exact moment I learned the truth. Emma, who had saved me, Emma, who had laughed with me, Emma, who had filled my world with color, was not real. A child spy. A carefully constructed lie, built to win my trust, to pull me in so that I could be delivered to some nameless, faceless national intelligence agency. I had been a mission, target. And when the truth came out, she panicked. She chose duty. For just a moment, she hesitated. And that was all it took. The agents closed in, closing the trap, boxing me in, taking away the one thing I hadn't realized I needed until it was already slipping through my fingers. Emma ran. And yet, at the very last second, she chose me instead. We ran together. We tried to escape. But she was injured. The wound was bad. Too bad. Blood soaked her clothes, seeped into the cracks of the pavement as I held her. Her breathing turned shallow, her fingers clenched weakly around my wrist. I begged her to hold on. I promised I would find a way. I promised I would fix it. Promised. But promises don't stop people from dying. In the end, she died. She would be a disgraceful spy, remembered as nothing more than a failure, someone who betrayed the very agency that created her. And I lost the only light that had ever colored my life. Chapter 209. Ha! I exhaled, dropping to my knees. It hurt. Not the kind of pain that could be ignored, not the sharp sting of a wound or the dull ache of exhaustion. This was the kind that settled deep, crawled into your bones, refused to leave. The kind that overshadowed everything else. The pain of losing her. The pain of losing something you cared about more than yourself. The pain of being powerless. That was why I swore to get stronger when I came to this world. Not just because I knew the future, not just because I had the advantage of foresight. No, it was more than that. It was excitement. Because in a world like this, with mana and monsters and limitless potential, it was possible. In my old world, no matter how intelligent I was, no matter how many plans I devised, there had always been limits. I could run. I could outthink. I could survive. But I could never win. Not against the world. Not against the machine of power that crushed people like me without a second thought. Not against them. And I had learned that lesson the hard way, as I held Emma's broken body in my arms, as her warmth faded, as her blood soaked into the cracks of the pavement, as the only color in my gray world disappeared. I had lost, and I had hated it. But in this world, I could become so strong that no one would ever be able to take something from me again. Strength. That was what I needed. Enough to make the world itself bow. Enough to protect what was mine. Enough to make violence the only language that mattered. And I wanted it, badly. The ability to inflict pain, to deter anyone from even thinking about taking what I held dear. Because even if I didn't have Emma, I was going to move forward. I was going to love again. I was going to protect again. And I was going to win. Compared to that pain, nothing else even came close. The pain of pushing my mana circuits to the limit? The pain of near-death experiences? Pathetic. They were comforts, compared to what I had already suffered. What was a few broken ribs next to the nights I spent running, bleeding, starving, unable to stop, unable to grieve because the second I did I would die. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So if it meant I could be strong enough to protect the people who mattered to me, if it meant I could stand at the top of the world and never have to kneel again, I would sell my soul to the devil himself. But in the end, would it be enough? Would I be enough? I had beaten Lucifer, yes, but that was him at his weakest. And he would only grow faster now. He would catch up. He would surpass me. And even he, the second hero, the strongest of his era, had died. I needed more. More desire. More impulse. More hatred. Yet, somewhere, deep inside, a voice whispered, "You can't. You can't protect them. You will fail. You will lose again. Just like you did with Emma. Right? Arthur." A voice sharp, clear, real, cut through the illusion like a blade. The world around me trembled, splintering at the edges. An intruder. How? Then warmth. Arms wrapped around me, firm and unrelenting, pulling me into something solid. My head found its place against something soft, a steady rhythm beating beneath my cheek. Fingers laced through my hair, threading gently, comforting, grounding. I froze. "Arthur, it's okay to cry." Seraphina's voice. A whisper. Soft. "Close. Because I'm here to listen." Cry? I don't cry. I hadn't cried in years. Emotions were flaws in the system, irrational variables that led to mistakes. Annoying. Useless. Couldn't wallow. Couldn't slow down. I had to move forward. I had to keep going. I had to. "Arthur, it's okay to slow down." Seraphina's voice, gentle but firm, as if she could see straight through me. "Please. Slow down? I can't. I can't take a break. I can't stop moving. If I stop, if I let my guard down, I'll lose again. I can't lose," I muttered. She only held me tighter. "I'm sorry you can't trust me," she whispered. "I'm sorry you don't believe in me enough. I'm sorry for being unworthy to listen to you." I said nothing. "Even then, I wished to comfort you." Her voice was softer now, barely more than breath. "I wish to hold you. I wish to love you. Please, Arthur. Right now, in your worst moment, allow me to hold you." My worst moment? This was my worst moment? I had lived through worse. I had survived the nights when I had to keep moving, keep hiding, keep running. because if I stopped, I would be dead by morning. I had wanted to cry so many times, but I hadn't, because there was no one to hold me, no one but myself, no one to tell me it was okay, no one to whisper that I could slow down. How could I forget? When I came to this world, had I just wanted to win? Had I just wanted to be the strongest? What was the point of getting stronger if I had nothing to fight for? I wanted to love. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to live. And, for the first time in years, I let myself breathe. I'm sorry, I murmured, pulling Serafina closer, my arms tightening around her. I was lost. For so long, I had avoided my past, shoving it into the darkest corners of my mind, refusing to acknowledge it. But wasn't that exactly what I didn't want Serafina to do? I had brought her here, to the ruins of the Northern Sea Ice Palace, so she could confront her ghosts, so she could move beyond them. And yet, what had I been doing all this time? Running, avoiding, hiding behind logic, behind control, behind the delusion that if I never looked back, the past couldn't touch me. I was afraid, pathetically afraid, and it had been holding me back. Because just like Serafina, Rachel, and Cecilia, I too had my own trial to face. I closed my eyes, inhaling the cold air, letting it settle in my lungs. No more avoiding, no more running. I'll move past you, Emma. I whispered the thought to myself, a silent vow, as I held Serafina even closer. My fingers found their way into her silver hair, caressing the back of her head. She didn't pull away. I exhaled, looking down at her. Thank you, I said softly, pressing my forehead against hers. Serafina blinked, cheeks dusted pink, her breath warm against my lips. No need to thank me, she muttered, shifting slightly. My gaze flickered down to her lips, plump, red. Before I could stop myself, I leaned in. Serafina stiffened for half a second. Then, just as quickly, melted into the kiss. Soft, warm, alive. When we finally pulled away, I smirked. You're not the only one who can surprise with a kiss, you know? Her narrowed eyes told me exactly what she thought of that. Are you feeling better? She asked, voice quiet, almost careful. Yeah. I nodded, this time with certainty. Thanks again, Sarah. Always, she murmured, her arms wrapping around me again. A silent reassurance, her face nuzzling against mine. I was worried. I'm all right? I whispered back, closing my eyes, breathing her in. She smelled like honey, a soft, lingering sweetness. When we finally pulled apart, I met her gaze, a soft smile tugging at my lips. Then I glanced downward. Something wasn't right. Pervert, Serafina said immediately. It lacked any real bite. But her cheeks were red. I frowned. Wait, hold on. I started, mind working through the details. Sarah, when you hugged me first, did you? Pervert, she repeated, this time even redder, before swiftly getting off me. Then, after a pause, did you like it? She wasn't denying it. I blinked. Wow. She's just going to say that out loud. Huh? Luna's voice abruptly cut into my thoughts. I almost jolted. You saw that. I shot back.
Obviously, Luna deadpan.
I've been able to see since the illusion. I sighed internally. Ever consider not spying on private matters?
Luna scoffed.
Please. To me, this is like watching two baby rabbits nuzzle each other. I stared at nothing. That is the weirdest analogy you could have chosen.
Luna hammed, entirely unbothered.
But not inaccurate. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. Serafina, meanwhile, was still very much red-faced, but with a victorious glint in her eye. I had no doubt she'd be bringing this up again. Chapter 210. After Serafina and I regained our bearings, we stepped out of the trial room, the door sealing behind us with a soft hum. The path ahead was eerily quiet. Not the kind of quiet that felt peaceful, but the kind that hinted at something waiting. Up ahead is the boss? Serafina asked, her voice steady, but her grip on her sword tightening just slightly. I nodded. 6-star beast. Glacial imp. Serafina frowned. A glacial imp? That's humanoid, right? Yeah, I confirmed. Not just humanoid. Intelligent. We finally reached the boss gate. An ancient, ice-covered door that pulsed faintly with mana. The air around it was colder than the rest of the dungeon, the frost creeping along the edges like veins in stone. I turned to her. I'll help you. Equip bone armor again. Serafina exhaled, nodding. When she had hugged me earlier, she had instinctively dismissed Erebus bone armor. Now, at my command, the crimson bones formed once more, wrapping around her like a second skin, glowing with an ominous sheen. She looked terrifyingly beautiful in it. We both needed to fight at full power for what lay ahead. I could have used Erebus myself, but I needed Serafina to take the lead. This was her fight as much as mine. We pushed the gate open. The doors groaned, shifting with an unnatural smoothness, revealing the arena beyond. Inside was a massive body of water, still and deep, its surface reflecting the pale blue glow of the cavern walls. The room was cavernous, cold, and empty, except for one thing. In the middle of the water, perched on a jagged rock formation, was a girl. No, not a girl. Not human, not elf, not dwarf. Something else entirely. Her skin was pure white, unnatural in its paleness, almost glowing against the icy backdrop. Her hair, long and ghostly, shimmered in waves of silvery frost, cascading down her back. Two curved blue horns jutted from her head, glistening with frost, their color mirroring the icy blue of her eyes. She was watching us, unmoving, waiting. Serafina tensed beside me, her breath visible in the freezing air. She looks young, she muttered. I didn't reply, because those cold, inhuman eyes, calculating, distant, aware, held nothing of youth in them. This wasn't a child. This was a predator. Don't be fooled, I warned, my voice sharp. She's dangerous. Go full throttle from the start. Serafina barely had time to nod before a wave of frozen spikes hurtled toward us, the air cracking with the force of their creation. Fast! I didn't hesitate. Lucent harmony activated instantly, my mana surging through my circuits like a storm. I extended my hand, my mind working at Laplace speed, constructing the five-circled matrix of a fire spell. Flame beam. A lance of blue fire erupted from my palm, colliding with the incoming ice spikes. The cavern flashed with opposing elements, fire and frost, heat and cold, as they clashed in midair, shattering into bursts of steam and shards. The moment the magic dissipated, I locked eyes with the glacial imp. She hadn't moved from her perch, but the air around her pulsed with power, wisps of frozen mist curling off her skin. She's between 5-circle and 6-circle magic. It was because she was this weak despite being a 6-star beast that my spell, empowered by Lucent Harmony, had been able to match her attack. I had to be faster. Sera, I called, summoning Evilus into my grip. The ancient grade sword gleamed in my hands, its weight familiar, its power humming beneath my fingers. A gift from Headmaster Eva Lopez, a reward for slaying the demon baroness. Though, in truth, Rachel and Cecilia had helped far more than they admitted. I adjusted my stance. White star flared to life, golden light flooding my veins. With Erebus already in bone armor form, I didn't have to worry about the clashing resonance between light and dark mana. That was one reason I had given Serafina Erebus. The other was simple. At her current level, she wouldn't be able to contribute otherwise. She was strong, but this was a fight against a superior opponent, and she was a swordswoman bound by range. Spellcasters could fire from a distance, adapt, adjust, but Serafina had to close the gap. Which also meant she was in the most danger. That was why bone armor was crucial. Not just to bolster her strength and speed, but to absorb damage, to turn fatal wounds into survivable ones. I exhaled. Serafina moved first. She blurred forward, the crimson glow of bone armor shimmering as she lunged at the imp, her sword flashing with deadly precision. The glacial imp barely tilted her head, frost forming in an instant, an icy shield blooming in front of her like an expanding lotus. Serafina slammed into it, her blade carving deep, but not through. A fraction of a second. That's all I needed. I focused everything, every ounce of speed, precision, power, and attacked in a blur of golden light. Godflash. The arena blurred as I moved, golden light bursting forth. Godflash. The glacial imp barely had time to react before my blade found its mark. Evilus slamming into her ice-armored torso with the force of a collapsing star. The sheer velocity of the strike sent her skidding back, her feet carving deep trenches into the frozen rock. But she didn't fall. Instead, she twisted, hands outstretched, and the ice retaliated. A shock wave of razor-sharp frost erupted from her body, spreading out like a shattering mirror. I barely had time to pivot before the cold hit me. A solid wall of force, slamming into my ribs, hurling me backward. My feet skidded against the ice, the impact rattling through my bones. Serafina was already moving. She lunged, her sword dissolving into a storm of plum blossoms, each petal glowing with lethal intent. Mount Hua-Sek's swordplay was built upon rhythm, movement, and absolute precision, and Serafina embodied it flawlessly. The blossoms rushed forward, twirling and twisting through the air, cutting through the frozen mist like it was nothing. The imp responded instantly. Shards of ice formed, rising up like a shield, but Serafina didn't stop. She spun mid-air, her body a streak of red and silver, her sword reforming in an instant. And then she cut. A single, devastating arc, sharp, controlled, lethal. The ice split apart, the defensive spell crumbling like shattered glass. The imp shrieked, staggering. This was our opening. I didn't hesitate. White star surged through my circuits, light mana reinforcing my entire body. My strength, speed, and reaction time skyrocketed in an instant. This is it. Serafina landed, breathless but steady, and her grip on her sword tightened. I'll set you up, I called. You finish it. She gave a small